This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
The Tathagata is light. Light is none other than wisdom. Wisdom takes the form of light. But wisdom is, in fact, formless. Therefore, this Tathagata is the Buddha of inconceivable light. This Tathagata fills the countless worlds in the 10 quarters, and so is called the Buddha of boundless light. Buddha, when appearing with form, is not called Supreme Nirvana. In order to make it known that Supreme Buddha is formless, the name Amida Buddha is expressly used. So I have been taught. Amida Buddha fulfills the purpose of making us know the significance of jinen, naturalness, or made to become so by itself. And this is Shinran talking to people who've travelled for days or even months to come to see him when he's living in Kyoto in old age. I believe that the reason that you have come here, crossing over more than 10 provinces at the risk of your lives, is solely to ascertain the path that leads to birth in the Pure Land. But if you suspect that I know ways other than the Nembutsu to attain birth, or that I am versed in the scriptures connected with them, you are greatly mistaken. If that be the case, there are many eminent scholars in the monasteries of Nara and Mount Hiei. So you should go to see them and ask them in detail about the way to attain birth in the Pure Land. As for myself, Shinran, I simply take to heart the words of my dear teacher, Honen. Just say the Nembutsu and be saved by Amida, and entrust myself to the primal vow. Besides this, there is nothing else. If Amida's primal vow is true, Shakyamuni's teaching cannot be false. If the Buddha's teaching is true, Chantal's commentaries cannot be false. If Chantal's commentaries are true, how can Honen's words be empty of meaning? If Honen's words are true, what I, Shinran, say cannot be meaningless. In brief, such is the true entrusting of this foolish one. Now, whether you accept the Nembutsu, entrusting yourself to it, or reject it, that is your own decision. And Tanisho 10, the Master Shinran said, in the Nembutsu, no self-working is true working. It is beyond description, explanation, and conception. So this talk is called Shinjin, Beyond Description, Explanation, and conception. Oh well, I might as well just laugh at the impossibility of the whole endeavour. Okay, great. Right, let's launch in. In a way, what Shinran talks about as living the Nembutsu. So he doesn't talk about practicing. He talks about living the Nembutsu. This is in the nature of a recap, okay? So yesterday we were looking at the twin aspects of deep mind, which are encapsulated in the phrase of the Nembutsu. So Namo Amida Butsu. And we've got Namo, us, deluded, foolish, conditioned, endlessly drowning and wandering and never knowing the path to liberation, doing stuff that causes ourselves and others suffering, and then doing it again. And doing our level best to practice and falling over ourselves right, left and centre. Now, if you don't relate to that as a picture of what it looks like to try and practice the Buddhist path, you probably best go on a different retreat. And on the other hand, in relation to the limitless. And this isn't theoretical or abstract. So, no true Buddhist teaching is ever saying, oh, let's have a load of really abstract conceptions and then let's have all this metaphysical speculation about the nature of Amida or when things began or ended or how it all came about. It's more like it's saying, look in your own experience. And of course there are really strong Buddhist concepts, like a sort of clarity of but what they're trying to do is they're trying to point out to us aspects of our own experience that tend to be hidden, or they're hidden in full view. They're right there. Impermanence is right there. Insubstantiality is right there. The selfing mind trying to get what it wants and falling over and causing suffering is right there. And yet, somehow we live round it. We sort of manage to live in complete obliviousness to how things are. So what we're looking at with these twin aspects of deep mind, they're trying to point us to aspects of our own experience that we'll be presenting at every moment. So you could say the whole path would be bearing witness to the selfing mind in action and just saying, well, what's that like? Good outcomes or not? And bearing witness to our relationship with what is not limited, what is Buddha. Am I going there first? Okay, why not go there first? And sometimes, well, it's interesting, in our group, I kind of said, so let's talk about how we experience whatever we call as the limitless or Buddha-ness. And there wasn't anybody there that said, I don't have any experience of that. It's like each of us will have a way that we experience, well, what happens when the selfing mind, the calculating mind, just lets up for a bit? And it might be beauty. It might be the silence at the end of a puja. It might be we're working really intensively in quite testing circumstances with a Buddhist team, and something incredibly moving arises where you just see how everybody's responding and everybody's sort of doing their best in that situation. You know, there's all sorts of ways in which we experience what arises when the selfing mind lets go a bit. And we're not always looking for presence. So, you know, the Hakurai, this calculating mind, it wants to know what things are and it wants to know what it looks like. And so we read something and then we've got it in a box and it's marked, this is an experience of the Buddha. And then we think, well, that's not happening. Or that only happened once. That was like, I had a peak experience once and I was on retreat and this thing happened and a Buddha appeared over the top of the trees and I was really blown away. And then we think, well, then that's not happening all the time. And yet, I'm doing everything back to front. And yet, there will be something in our experience all the time where it's like we are in relation to the limitless. And we're turning towards what that relationship feels like in that moment. And I mean, sometimes if I'm in quite a sort of narrow, tied up in myself mental state, what my relationship to the limitless feels like is, go away. No, I don't want to know. I'm just really bothered about this thing and just don't tell me I shouldn't be bothered about it. Or so it might be that the relationship is like that. Or it might be that the relationship is just absence. It just feels like our inner landscape is grey or bleak or numb or, you know, there's nothing much going on. And yet that is still a relatedness. It might be that we can kind of remember there might have been a time where actually we were in connection. And it feels like a million light years away. And there's an emotional quality to that, which is sort of sadness or grief or loss, or like there was something we were in touch with and now we're not in touch with it. So if there's somebody in your life and they're very dear to you, maybe you live with them, maybe they're just a close friend and you see them quite often, and then they tell you that they're going away for work for 3 years and they're going to live in Azerbaijan or something like that. And then they leave. Well, what are you in touch with then? You're in touch with you miss them. So how is your connection showing up? So when you're with them, you're in touch with their presence. And when they leave for Azerbaijan, you're in touch with their absence. You're in touch with the fact that they're not there right now. And that absence is your connection. So it's in this sense that we are always in connection with the limitless. So Shinran uses these sort of like a constellation of terms or a constellation of words and concepts. And when you read Shinran is not the easiest guy to read, I have to say. But when you read what he says, well, like when you read the Buddha, for instance, he does lists, doesn't he? So this leads to that, and that leads to the next thing, and the next thing leads to that. And it's quite sort of, there's one thing, and then there's the second thing, and then there's the third thing, and then there's the fourth thing, and you know, and it's quite kind of linear. So it's how the Buddha tends to teach is as a path. Now, how Shinran tends to teach is it's like path has just fallen over for him. It's like he just can't see things like that anymore. So he's seeing everything as interrelated and everything as present at the same time and conditioning each other. I'm hoping later in the week we'll get a chance to look at the spiral path, because you can either look at that as a linear path where you start at dukkha and end up at awakening, but you can also look at it as like this sort of constellation where different aspects of the spiral path kind of show up at different points in experience. Anyhow, so when Shinran's trying to, he's trying to describe, like, he's trying to describe the impossible, he's trying to describe what is beyond description, explanation, and conception. Now, does that remind you of the perfection of wisdom? It's like, the perfection of wisdom in Shinran, it's like they're just coming at the same thing and they're just coming at it from opposite ends, but it's the same. They're both trying to say something about something that you can't actually say anything about. So one of the terms that he uses that we're really familiar with is Amida. Now, actually, we think that we tend to focus in on Amida, like, it's this gold bloke, and he's embodying these qualities, and, does this bloke exist, or does this bloke not exist? Are we imagining him? Is he Santa Claus? And so what we do is we try to do a fixing. We try to kind of go like, right, this is a fixed entity. We're not criticising ourselves for doing this. This is just what the unenlightened mind does. It's not, it's not a personal failing or something. It's just, it's existential. But actually, Shinran quite rarely says, take refuge in Amida. Usually he says, take refuge in the vow. Take refuge in the primal vow. And this is where you just get this language where you go, primal vow? Like, what? What is going on there? And in fact, in one place, he's actually saying, well, the vow is what causes Dharmakara to become a bodhisattva and causes him to have this aspiration and causes him to become Amida Buddha. So it's like, well, what comes first? Actually, what comes first is the vow. So the vow is Shinran's language. What we would be more familiar with is bodhicitta, or the will to enlightenment. Now, do I have this quote that I want? Here we go. So this is Shinran talking about Amida, and he says, the Dharma body of suchness has neither colour nor form. Thus the mind cannot grasp it, nor words describe it. The Dharma body as compassionate means took the form of Bhikshu Dharmakara. So he's throwing concepts at something that you can't really express in concepts. But if you look at how Bhante talks about the absolute and the relative bodhicitta, he uses almost exactly the same language where he's saying, well, you can't say anything about the absolute bodhicitta. It has neither colour nor form. All you can say is that it is as it is. And then you've got the relative bodhicitta, which is like the active aspect, which can never be ours. You can't chop it up into bits. You can't possess it. It can never be my bodhicitta and your bodhicitta. And yet there is something that is he kind of goes as if it's an active force in the world. So it's like we can participate in bodhicitta. Bodhicitta can awaken in us. Or you could say the process of us awakening is bodhicitta like yeast in our being. Transformation is happening, the bread is rising. But what it really is it's just we're trying to put words and concepts to a process that is describing how awakening arises in the world. And however you put it, you have to go, well, you can think of it a bit like that. Like, does it help to think of it like that? But you can't really say, oh yeah, that's definitely how it is. You can't say, yes, there is an active force at work in the world, because then you've got this thing over there that's a force, and then you've got us here. And then how do these two separate things interrelate? Do you see what I mean? It's like, however you speak, you then have to say, well, it's not really quite like that. Yeah. So, in the parts we've already heard, Shinran saying, well, Amida is formless. Amida is wisdom. Wisdom takes the form of light, but light is formless. The Buddha is formless. And it kind of goes round in circles where you kind of throw these words at it, and there's just like, this is metaphor. This is us trying to get a sense of something. But as soon as we cling on and we kind of go, wisdom, right, okay, what's wisdom? Right, well, it's the 3 of this and it's the 10 of that. Or we go, light, okay, right, light, okay, I understand light, the speed of light. As soon as we do that, we've kind of lost it. And then another of these constellation of terms that Shinran uses is jinen. Jinen. And so very famous piece called On Jinen Honin, which we just heard some of. And Shinran saying, Amida Buddha fulfills the purpose of making us know the significance of jinen made to become so by itself. So what this is talking about is like the alchemy of us as we are coming into relation with awakening on the limitless. So like us coming into contact with the Buddha, like every time we do a puja, every time we see the sun slanting through a break in the clouds, and suddenly everything opens up and we just realise that those things we were fussing about, actually, we didn't need to fuss about them. That thing about like that thing that person said to me, doesn't matter. So every time we come into contact, us deluded, what is beyond that, there's a natural alchemy that happens. And this is the bread rising. This is how change happens. And it can be like us in conversation. So it's like it can be us with another human being. It can be us in relation to a text, us in relation to beauty. It doesn't matter where this limitless quality is showing up. But where does transformation happen? How does transformation happen? It's a genuine question. Does it happen by you sitting down and thinking, right, I really need to sort this thing out, so I'm going to not do that thing again? That can be, that's not it might be a good thought, but it's like that's not actually how that thing's going to transform. That thing's going to transform by us doing it, us realising the limitation and the painfulness of it, And us being in contact with something that is beyond that pattern, that means that actually we don't need to do that pattern anymore. I just keep wanting to go, is this making any sense? Okay, right. At least to some degree. Yeah. So Shinran's doing this thing where he's saying, well, like the process of awakening, it's not made up of like static things called like Buddhas over there and us over here. And it's process, and it is a process of us being in relation. It's a process of unenlightenment and enlightenment coming into relationship. So self-development, path and goal, self-surrender, relatedness. So every time we move into that relatedness of us and Buddha, we're in this realm of Shin living the Nembutsu. And just to say, actually, in Japanese and in Chinese, it's kind of harder to pin down concepts because they don't use pronouns. So there's no kind of, like for Amida, there's no kind of he, him, his, because you just don't have them in that language. Amida quite often gets called our compassionate mother, actually. Mm. So Amida's not really gendered in the same way. And when you write Amida in Sino-Japanese, it's exactly the same character whether you're writing the limitless, the boundless, or Amida as a name. There's no difference. So if you've got, I take refuge in the Buddha of unhindered light, or I take refuge in Amida, you can say, I take refuge in the measureless. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you don't have the I either, so you just have take refuge, measureless. Mm-hmm. And then you just have to just have to add all the other bits in. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, there's much less I and there's much less Buddha. It's just like the action, taking refuge, and this quality, which is measurelessness. Okay, so I'm going to read you a bit by Reverend Enrique Galvan Alvarez. So this is a friend of mine who lives in Manchester, and he's ordained in the Jodo Shinshu. And this is from a talk that he gave. There is no Buddha outside of Namo Amida Butsu. And Namo Amida Butsu is an expression of interdependence. On one hand, Amida Buddha, enlightenment, awakening. Namo is bono, klesha, defilement, confusion, the opposite of enlightenment. And they both appear together in one scroll, one phrase, one breath. This is the essence of the teaching. In the image of Amida Buddha, there is something missing, and that is us. Maybe if we had a pictorial representation or a statue of Amida embracing you, that could be okay. But we just have Amida Buddha, and that is misleading. We are part of it, part of the dynamic. What we are bowing to is the deep interconnection between us and Buddha. And Buddha is not an external being. It is a possibility of awakening that we and all beings embody, and that exists through all of us. That's why the Nembutsu is so important. Shantao, one of the Chinese masters who Shinran quotes, says, "There is no Buddha outside of Shinjin, true in trusting." It's not like there is a Buddha and then you believe in the Buddha. Whatever the Buddha is comes alive as you awaken to Shinjin. So guess what? We're now going to go on to Shinjin. Okay, so the direction that I'm going to go with Shinjin for the rest of this presentation is looking at it as faith and looking at it as insight. Now, there are other ways of unpacking Shinjin. I mean, Nagapriya says you have to live your way into a world where the term Shinjin has meaning. It's like you can't actually understand it outside of a whole way of seeing things. And tomorrow we'll be looking at Shinjin and going for refuge, which is another way of looking at it. So there's two Chinese characters used to write this term Shinjin, and actually when they're separate they're both Shin, but saying Shin would sound a bit silly, so so that they change the letter so it's Shinjin. And one of the kanjis, the Chinese characters, is faith or trust. And the other one is heart-mind. So, like all these Buddhist traditions, heart and mind are not separated. It's like it's one, heart-mind. So what I've discovered over the years is that there seem to be innumerable lists of 3 kinds of faith. It seems to be every tradition you look at has a slightly different list of 3 kinds of faith. And we've already encountered a couple of the lists of 3 kinds of faith that are mentioned in the Pure Land Sutras. So we've got sincere mind, joyful, entrusting mind, or aspiration for birth. This longing for awakening or longing for the Pure Land. And Shinran says, well, all these 3, they're single as well. So they're different aspects of a single mind of faith. So it's like you can't actually untangle those aspects from each other. Now, if we look at Shraddha in the Abhidharma tradition, again we have a nice list of 3. And you're probably more familiar with these things, with this list. So, know your mind. We've got Bhante quoting the Abhidharma saying, Shraddha, it is a deep conviction, lucidity and longing for those things which are real, have value and are possible. And Bhante says, when faith is categorized as lucidity and longing, though not deep conviction, faith is tinged with the transcendental. So we've got faith, even in the Abhidharma tradition, as having a transcendental quality, a transcendental tinge to it. You know, when Bhante talks about what is ultimate in us resonating with what is ultimate in the universe. So you could say what is limitless in us resonating with what is limitless in the universe. And so those Abhidharma 3 aspects of faith, well, we've got a deep understanding and ardent desire for what is true. That's the first one, the one that's more sort of cognitive, a deep conviction. Then the second, intuition, lucidity as to what has value. And Bhante says, there are certain things one is going to do and certain things one is not going to do. It's like the opposite of indecision. There's just like this relief. It's just like, with clarity, actually, my life's going to be about this now. And everything sort of gets sorted out. You're like, oh yeah, things are a lot more straightforward. And then there's the volitional aspect, this longing for what is possible. And you can see how that really relates to Shinran's third mind of faith, like longing for the Pure Land, longing for awakening. So there's similarity and difference between Shinran's 3 minds and the Abhidharma. So you could say sincere mind and deep conviction, well, they're kind of both rational. Joyful entrusting and lucidity, like both are emotional and both bring clarity about what you're going to do and not do. An aspiration for birth and longing for what is possible, like both are volitional. So there's some quite clear differences as well. So the volitional faith, that longing for what is possible as described in the Abhidharma tradition, it's confidence that we can attain the path and the goal, faith in our own power to do practices and realise the truth. It's very interesting when the two models meet, because it seems like they're saying absolutely the opposite, because Shinran is saying, realise that you can't do it by yourself. Realise that you're trying your level best, you're putting your heart into the practices, and yet your success is limited. Whereas the volitional faith in Shinran's description of faith, it's more like, where is that longing coming from? Like, is it a faith in like my power to do the practices? Or is it just a faith that like, I am going to live my relationship to the limitless and transformation will happen? So there's those different sides to it. I'm missing a quote that I wanted to give in now, which is about paradox, which is by a physicist, by Niels Bohr, which you might have heard before, but he says, the opposite of a true statement is a false statement, but the opposite of a deep truth can be another deep truth. So you've got one thing which is, I can do it. I can follow the path. I can do the practices. And that's a deep truth. It's not that it's wrong. And then there's another deep truth, which is, I can't do the practices. I can't make myself enlightened by my own self-will. The I that wants to do the practices is a kind of self, it's like there's never going to be a me that gets enlightened because that whole concept has fallen over. So you've got one deep truth being the opposite of another deep truth. So both for the Abhidharma and in the Pure Land Sutras, the three types of faith, or the three minds of faith, it's like they're mental attitudes or qualities we can develop. Like it's our faith. Yeah, my faith's strong. Oh no, I don't think I've got very much faith at the moment. In the Pure Land Sutras, it's the three minds of faith that the practitioner has to generate. And if the practitioner has generated enough faith, they'll be born in the Pure Land. And you generate the faith by, visualising the Pure Land and, doing all the different practices in the Contemplation Sutras and so on. So, again, we've got like these two deep truths. So it's like that's fine. That's not, it's a path you can follow. Go for it. And Shinran is saying something else. So for Shinran, Shinjin is never yours. You can't produce it, you can't manufacture it, you can't create it, you can't make it be there. And yet, Shinjin is present in the smallest movements of the mind towards awakening. So it all depends, we just have these habitual ways of how we conceptualize the process of awakening. Yeah, so the practical implication is it's like, well, the mind of the Buddha is already active and present in us all the time. So how you want to think about this is, okay, so there you are, maybe you're supporting a beginner's class or you're leading the beginner's class, and you've got 30 people in front of you, and you maybe tell the life story of the Buddha, and you say, we can change. Happiness comes from within. Everything is interconnected. Anyone recognise the Sheffield Beginners course? Yeah. And out of those 30 people, maybe one or two of them will have a response where they'll just go, yes, yes. And that person that I met as I came in the door, there was something about them. There's something, I don't know what it is, but there's something here and I need to know more. This is going to be important in my life. And they come back and they finish the beginner's course and they go on to the next course. Or sometimes they go off for years and they come back. I was one of them, actually. It took me multiple beginner's courses to actually get beyond the beginner's course. And yet they know that there's something important that they can't let go of. And at some point they start following through on that. And the other 28 will think, oh yeah, well that's quite interesting, but I fancy evening classes in pottery now. Or, yeah, Turkish. I think I'm going to learn Turkish next month. And, and you can't argue with it, but it's like there's something that has happened for those two people that hasn't happened for the other 28 people, or not at that moment anyway. Now, did they manufacture that? Like, can you make yourself have a response to something? Even the first moment, like you had to have seen a flyer and then thought, oh yeah, right, okay. Or somebody said, oh, I'll take you to the Buddhist centre, and you didn't say, what for? Something will have happened. Now, how we habitually think about that is that's me, okay? So just bear in mind that every time we go, that's me, that's out there, we are doing a self-other thing, so we add in that difference. So we conceptualise that as, I decided to attend the beginner's course, and I decided that I liked it, and I decided that I wanted to carry on. And then I decided that I wanted to make a commitment to becoming a mitra. And it was my going for refuge. And it's like, and when I put it like this, like I can see a few people just sort of like smiling slightly. And it's sort of like, this is how we think. It's my going for refuge. It's my response. It's my commitment. But is it? It's like that is one way of conceptualising it, and that way of conceptualising is not ultimate. So the way Shinran thinks about it is Shinjin has arisen in you. Shinjin has arisen in that person. And actually, it's very similar to how Bhante talks about perfect vision. You know how that's actually a departure that Bhante has made from the Theravadin tradition. So he doesn't talk about right understanding. So if you look at a sort of classic Theravadin presentation of the Noble Eightfold Path, it talks about right understanding. So it's like you reflect on the Four Noble Truths, and you think about the Noble Eightfold Path, and you get a clear understanding. Whereas Bhante talks about perfect vision, and he talks about it as a spiritual experience, a flash, something that just arises in you. When Bhante talks about perfect vision, he's talking about Shinjin.
Sorry. Penny's just dropped.
It's always nice when you watch somebody's penny drop. Yeah. And can you see how Shinran is talking about Shinjin is the same as how Bhante is talking about bodhicitta, where it's like, it's not yours. How can it be? It's never yours. And yet, this aspiration for awakening has arisen. Yeah. So, how we can sort of turn things over is, instead of thinking, well, how can I strengthen my faith? Or how can I deepen my going for refuge? My going for refuge. How? Shinran's saying, well, just drop that way of thinking, because to the extent we think of it as mine, it's going to be limited anyway. So how about if we just drop that whole way of thinking, turn it on its head, and it's more like we just notice that Shinjin is already present and alive in our life. So this is us noticing the limitless. This is the limitless half of the Nembutsu. So there's like us conditioned, and then just noticing that awakening processes are already unfolding within us. And actually, like, could you stop them? How would you go about stopping them? And you're just noticing that that's present, and you're honouring it. So even if you just have the thought of, oh, I could chant a mantra, or, oh, I could be kind in this situation, or, oh, I could meditate. Already what's happened is Shinjin is arising in you. And Shinran talks about Shinjin as a gift from Amida. So it's Amida's mind bestowed on you. It's granted you. It's like a present. It's this free gift. Because could you earn it? Or kind of deserve it? Or like be good enough? It just doesn't make any sense. It's like a response to the limitless can't ever be something that like a little me has produced. And to quote the Buddha, what we dwell on, that we become. So you could say that's the Buddha saying, Jinen, what we dwell on, that we become. Do we have to make ourselves become it? Do we have to, I don't know, sort of shape something or produce something or manufacture something? What we dwell on, that we become. When we notice Shinjin, faith, Shraddha, arising within us, and we notice it, by itself, that will grow. We don't have to kind of prod it and kind of... how could you prod it? Do you see what I mean? It's just like silly. The whole thing, you just think, how do we usually think? And then you think, well... Is it really like that? Does that really match what the experience of Shinjin unfolding within us looks like? Does it actually feel like that? This is where I want to go, is this making sense again? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Phew. So hopefully it's clear from this that what we're doing is we're noticing, recognising and trusting responsiveness, faith responses. We're not chasing a big experience that's out there that we could manufacture if we did these things and then somehow the Buddha's going to appear to us at some point in the future. Okay, so this is absolutely not what the self-surrender myth is about. It's like you notice right now, in this moment, that Shinjin is already present within you, that you're already in relation to the limitless, whether that's as presence or as absence. You just notice what is already there. That connection has happened in the past. Now it's alive within us. We notice it. And transformation happens by itself. I've lost a quote I want, but I know I've got it. Here we go. So if Shinjin is other, so remember, other is what is other than the limited self and other mind, okay? So if it cannot be ours, if it is awake within us but it's not ours, if it's of the nature of the transcendental, well, it is also of the nature of wisdom or prajna. And Shinran says again and again that Shinjin is itself wisdom. So for Shinran, there is no difference between prajna and Shraddha. And for Bhante, there is no difference ultimately between clouds of terms, Shraddha and prajna. So he says this in a few places. So a survey of Buddhism. Faith of this kind, he's just been talking about Shinran, is not faith in the current sense of the term, but the emotional counterpart of wisdom. And he does carry on in the survey, but I thought I'd ring the changes and read what he says in Living Wisely. Ultimately, we are looking for a quality of wisdom that supersedes conventional understanding. The term wisdom is therefore open to misunderstanding if it is distinguished from faith in too rigid a way. Wisdom is not a cognitive as distinct from an emotional faculty. One cannot speak of wisdom in terms either of knowing or of feeling. It is both, once it is experienced at a high enough level. It is an intuitive understanding and also an intuitive feeling. In other words, at a higher level, there is no real distinction between faith and wisdom, or devotion and understanding. So this is a distinctive emphasis of Sangharakshita's, where he really sees all the different forms of positive emotion, and he sees that they are inseparable from wisdom, from prajna, from seeing things clearly. So he does the same with metta. He says, like metta at its highest level and prajna, they're the same thing. And he says shraddha at its highest level, wisdom at its highest level, they're the same thing. You cannot separate the emotional and the cognitive. So you might ask yourself, well, how does it feel different when we see insight as responding with emotional intelligence to a situation? And it might be like responding with metta, but it might also just be responding with, when you interact with somebody with an awareness of their potential and your potential, suddenly the whole interaction isn't fixed. Like, how is that different when you're interacting in that way? So we're going to carry on tomorrow with Shinjin as insight. But I'll just finish with making the point where this is where I want to sort of line everything up. How we think about our practice is we do it. I do practice so that I achieve a goal in the future. And how does the practice happen? I make a decision to do it. Well, again, you can think like that. It's not that you can't think like that. But Shinran's turned everything on its head. So it's more like all our practice is simply a result. It's an expression of Shinjin. It's an expression of our responsiveness to value, or our responding to the limitless. It's processes of Shinjin, Dharma Niyama processes, alive and awake within us. Even in the smallest aspects of like even coming into a room and taking your meditation seat, that is a result of Shinjin. It's a result of Amida's mind granted to you. So in that sense, everything we do as practice is a gift. It's given to us. It's like, sometimes I think, wow, how did I get so lucky that I was given this life where I get to live at Taraloka, and I've been told about meditation, and then I live in a context where we meditate every morning, and I get to live with a bunch of people who also want to fulfill their potential, and we all get to serve the retreat centre. And even when it's just like things go wrong and people fall out and the heating breaks and somebody complains about the food, and And yet, how did I ever get given a life that is so meaningful and so imbued with, beauty, or just imbued with a sense of the limitless, maybe. I don't quite know how to put it. So how would it change our relationship to practice if we felt it was granted us as a gift, rather than something we have to drive or push or work harder at or be better at? It's just more like it's arising as this sort of spontaneous expression of our responsiveness to value. How would that feel different? So that's maybe the question that I'd like you to go away and reflect on and then talk about in the groups. How would it be different if that was how you saw your practice life?
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you